Since the creation of Israel in 1948, the Middle East witnessed several wars and military confrontations between the Zionist state and neighboring Arab countries. But the most important one, which has changed the face of the region, was the 1973 Yom Kippur or October War between Israel, Egypt and Syria. Historically, the circumstances of the 1973 war were linked to the Six Days War of 1967, when Israel attacked Egypt, Jordan and Syria and occupied of what remained of historic Palestine, as well as the Egyptian Sinai and the Golan Heights from Syria. Within 6 days, the three Arab forces suffered a major defeat, and Israel occupied territory that was 3.5 times its size. This defeat caused a great wound to the Arab dignity and pride. In January 1973, the Egyptian and Syrian former presidents Anwar Sadat and Hafez al-Assad concluded a secret agreement to launch a joint offensive to regain the territory their countries lost in 1967. However, Anwar Sadat didn't tell his Syrian counterpart his true intention, which wasn't liberating the entire Sinai, but merely a limited war and then engaging in peace talks with Tel Aviv. In contrast, Hafez al-Assad wanted to liberate the entire Golan Heights by military force. In this regard, Patrick Seal, the late British journalist and Hafez al-Assad biographer, said,
"Assad told me that from the moment of his seizure of power, his ambition, his dream, was to avenge the defeat of 1967 when Syria had lost the Golan to Israel and when Assad himself was the defense minister."
Damascus and Cairo chose Yom Kippur Jewish religious holiday to attack the Israeli occupation forces, because on this day there are no radio or television broadcasts, shops close and transportation shuts down as part of religious vacation. At the first few hours, the Egyptian army crossed the Suez Canal and captured the Bar-Lev line, which was a fortified sand wall on the east bank of the canal. This initial success was called the crossing by the Egyptians. On the Syrian front, the Syrian army crossed the 1967 ceasefire line known as the Purple Line and within 2 hours captured Israel's Eye, which was a key Israeli observation point 2,000 meters above sea level on top of Mount Hermon. However, within less than 24 hours, Israel mobilized its forces. At this time, the Egyptian forces suddenly stopped their advance, and when Hafez al-Assad called Anwar Sadat to inquire about why the Egyptian army stopped, the latter didn't answer al-Assad's calls, leaving him almost alone in the war. Therefore, Israel focused its operations on the Syrian front, and after 10 days, turned the table upside down by occupying territories deep inside Syria and Egypt. To lift the pressure on Syria and Egypt, oil-rich Arab countries reduced the oil production by 5% and enforced an embargo on oil supply to the US, which led to major global price hikes, forcing the US to reassess its support for Israel. On October 22nd, the UN Security Council passed Resolution 338, which called for a ceasefire, and reaffirmed Resolution 242, passed in 1967, which called on Israel to withdraw from the territories it occupied in 1967. In January 1974, Henry Kissinger, the US Secretary of State, brokered a disengagement agreement between Egypt and Israel, and in May 1974, another disengagement agreement between Syria and Israel. Egypt and Syria regained a portion of their territory, and UN buffer zones were established between them and Israel. Although Hafez al-Assad asked Sadat to refuse a one-sided peace agreement with Israel and urged him to promote a comprehensive deal that includes Palestine, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Egypt, the latter went alone to Jerusalem and gave a speech to the Israeli Knesset. After this historic visit, which was condemned by all Arab nations and with the mediation of former US President Jimmy Carter, Egypt and Israel signed on September 17, 1978, a peace treaty called Camp David Accords. To the Syrians and Palestinians, Sadat had placed his own interests first and put the Palestinian cause on the shelf. And for the Americans, Sadat's policy was the key for the US hegemony in the region and kicking the Soviet influence out of the region. After less than 2 decades, Jordan joined Egypt and signed a peace treaty with Israel in 1992, making them the only 2 Arab countries to have officially normalized relations with Israel, which continues to occupy the West Bank, East Jerusalem, Gaza, and the Golan Heights to this day. After 45 years of the 1973 war, the situation in the Middle East changed drastically. Israel, that still occupies Arabic territories, is no more considered the enemy by many Arab governments, and Washington succeeded to promote Iran as the new enemy, especially among the oil-rich countries who invested all their wealth and money to destroy the anti-Israeli players in the region.
This may surprise you, but I have to admit that the Iran deal has had one positive consequence, an unintended one, but a positive consequence. By empowering Iran, it brought Israel and many Arab states closer together than ever before. Closer together than ever before in an intimacy and friendship that I've not seen in my lifetime and would have been unimaginable a few years ago.